Book 1, Law of Salimi, Chapter 61, Law of Salimi the Idealist. In my pursuit of knowledge and learning, I had met numerous great scholars as well as various interesting students who seemed to be learning in order to gain better materialistic success in life. In one particular class, I was unanimously called as an idealist in my PhD research because I wished for the present Islamic banking system in Malaysia to practice the true product that were based from the teachings of Islam instead of converting the conventional products and slapping the seal of Sharia compliance upon them. In doing so, the newly developed Islamic products had been proven to contain the element of riba as well as imbued with debt-based concept which replicated the effect of riba practice. For example, if you replace credit card with debit card, which still promoting the concept of lending and debt-based society, there would be not much different from before. It would still create excessive debt amongst the household and in the masses public in Malaysia, where now Islamic banking products would help to improve the debt size instead of helping to remove debt practices from society. My understanding and knowledge about this subject matter came from people who practice strict principles that wish to abolish riba practices from the face of this earth, such as Imran and Hussein, Taqi Usmani, and many other great scholars who understood the concept of banking in both conventional and Islamic banking perspectives. They believe in the concept of closing the door that might lead to the path of damnation and destruction by simply abolishing riba in any form, name, replication, or other concept that might be recreated in the present Islamic banking system in Malaysia as well as all over the world. My thesis suggested that most the scholars who supported the current practice seem to be lacking the knowledge of conventional banking system, including the concept of credit creation, money creation, and debt practices from the earliest practice that went as far as in the extinct civilizations. When the scholars had acquired ample knowledge of conventional banking system and truly see the real threat and danger of riba practices and its effect, I had observed that virtually all of those scholars started to support the strict views offered by Taqi Usmani and Imran and Hussein, who wished to abolish riba from this planet of Earth. At present, the names of these scholars were rarely mentioned or even considered to be existed by the popular views, mainstream scholars, and experts who operated in the present Islamic banking system in Malaysia. Don't you wonder why such practice is happening in our society? I did wonder during my research, and I studied as deep as possible to uncover the truth. Based on one of my interview with a great scholar and experts in Islamic banking system, he said, who claimed or said Islamic banking system intended to help society. It was crazy to even contemplate the possibility of what he said. But after time goes by and the closer I got to the truth that was hidden from the masses public, I started to realize that the scholar talks about the real truth that happened in our present system. It was scary to imagine that the reality of life, while it was horrendous to discover that it was the truth. According to the scholar, the concept of Islamic banking was simply to gain money from Muslims who were reluctant to invest in non-Islamic products in fear of the practice of riba or usury. Honestly, I do not wish to be an idealist, but that was the picture that was painted from my understanding about the teachings of Islam, which had been proven to be practiced during the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The word idealist is an honorable compliment from my perspective, but to the other students, it meant that I was the oddball and the crazy student who was considered as the black swan in my classroom. I did not diminish my belief and effort to uphold the teachings of Islam and to utterly abolish the practice of riba from our present society and later leave our universe from its rampant clenching claws that had been the cause of poverty, destitution, and suffering to the masses public all over the world, especially in highly indebted countries that were too poor to even afford making payment on the interest charged upon their debts. In essence, this riba practice had took all the wealth that was left by the masses poor and given them to the elite 1% who are extremely wealthy. As Allah the Almighty had mentioned in the Holy Quran that He had announced war against those who practice riba, I could not stand by in my life and sit idly by doing nothing. I had to become the fighter who would challenge our present society to abandon the practice of accumulating debts in their life and riba practices, whether it was cleverly hidden from another name or simply purely riba practice that was openly defied the teachings of Islam. If people perceive me as an idealist madness of a person who was stricken in some crazy fantasy that I could change this present world towards abandoning riba, I would just smile at every one of them, because I had always been an outcast all of my life. The only time that I was not lonely was when I met another great scholars who had seen the truth in the war against riba. I do feel extremely lonely when I walk amongst the millions of the masses public, but I do not care, because I truly and honestly believe that Allah the Almighty is on my side on this war against riba. This burden of fighting against riba seemed to feel like I had several tons of weight that I had to carry for every step that I took when walking the path of a scholar who were extremely rare, with almost reaching it to its extinctions. So I said to those who call me the crazy idealist, let scholars who had the title of professors, like those who I had interviewed, fight the war against the riba in the official academic field of war. Let me, a simple student who had nothing in my life, to fight against riba in the stage of writing books, where I intend to invade every traditional genre possible in writing industry and to share the knowledge about riba to the masses public at global level. I intended to write about zombies that had existed in our present society due to the practice of riba, based on the Quranic verse and hadith that explored about this subject matter. I will write about science fiction regarding a country which was condemned with the plague of riba in the comparison to the ideal Islamic nation that had utterly abolished riba practices. I will write about love story that introduced to the perspective of Islam and explored how to abolish riba from their lifestyle as spouses in marriage. I would strive to introduce the real threat and danger of riba into the present society through my writing of upcoming books. Whether I would write about the real stories or science fiction, every concept that I introduce should be based on my research that I had discovered during my PhD thesis. Finally, I intend to write about my PhD thesis in the form of digital book, since I had no longer the official channel to access the academic journals and publications. Since I had chosen to walk this path of a scholar who wished to fight against riba practices, I am currently consumed in this work, and thus do not have time for pretty much anything else except for ibadah or performing good deeds to Allah the Almighty. It might be a great reason as to why I fear to marry anyone at this moment of time in my life, because it would not allow me to be fair and responsible towards others in my current lifestyle. The best example would be the fact that I had chosen to let myself forgo from completing my PhD program, as well as allowing a huge debt to linger in my life. How am I going to be a good husband to anyone at this present state? And if I would be required to make the same choices again in the future of my life? Hence, I would rather to follow the path of great scholars who would sacrifice their own happiness in this life, such as Bishr al-Hafi. I wish I had the great ability of those previous great scholars who once roamed the face of this earth, which in the case of Bishr al-Hafi, he did so barefooted. I am envious of their greatness and their unimaginable faith to Allah the Almighty, where many of them had read books for 100 times and wrote on the book. I had read this book 100 times and had memorized every single words in it. I am still envious of their great academic skills, even though I had some abilities of my own that truly helped in my pursuit for learning and knowledge in the present time of modern civilization. Compared to every single one of them, my life journey was extremely microscopic in nature, and I do pray to Allah the Almighty to enhance my extremely limited amount of knowledge so that I could provide more benefit to the masses public. When I look at my life and every events that had occurred in my life from the moment that I could recall in my memory until this very second that I wrote these words at the age of 33 years old, I could see them being played in front of me like a video that I could pause, stop, zoom, and analyze whenever it is required. I could recall every single words that I had recorded with my selective permanent memory ability, especially the words coming from the heavenly monsters at UiTM campus Manggataw. Those words soothed my heart and caused my allergic reaction to be triggered, where waters would flow down my cheek. Although it was absolutely not crying, it was an allergic reaction that was uniquely afflicted to my life. I hate it when it happened to me, especially when other people could see it happening, because I had a seriously hard time explaining of my allergic condition to others. As I allowed anyone who purchased my book to ask me any questions about my life, please try to shun from asking about my allergic reaction. Nonetheless, I had no regret with every choice that I had made, with the hopes that Allah the Almighty would forgive all of my sins before I reach the day of my demise. I fear nothing in my life except for Allah the Almighty. I remembered the word of a great scholar amongst the heavenly masters who said, "To Allah, this universe is nothing but a speck of dust. To this universe, I am nothing but a speck of dust. Hence, to Allah the Almighty, I am nothing but a speck of a dust." When I wrote this saying and began to reanalyze it, I realized that it was an additional mathematic formula applied with the perspective of Islam. I smiled, realizing that 16 years ago, it was spoken to me like a true mathematical genius of a great scholar of Islam that he was and still is. I am humbled by his word, which inspired me to continue my path of a scholar until this very moment in my life, despite everyone calling me a mad idealist. And there goes my allergic reaction again. Thank you very much for listening, and hope to see you again in the next chapter.